Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the Day 191 summary. We'll be trying to do these the day after we originally covered this news in a more condensed format so that way some of y'all who are not able to catch it then can catch it today. And so, without further ado, we will actually be skipping over all of the Russian news tonight because beyond it just showing Russia's stupidity, there's not really a lot that it adds to the actual situation going on in Ukraine. And so moving on down into Ukraine, and specifically Russia for just a second in the Belgorod region, we actually saw that a Russian S300 surface-to-air missile launcher fired off an S300, which then slammed into a neighborhood in Belgorod. It was a failed launch, and there's really no way that you can make this stuff up. And so here's the video. When you see in the distance the S300 being launched, we can already see the trail of several others that have been launched, but this one begins to take a more parallel route with the ground. Which usually is not considered a good thing, as it then flies right into a neighborhood and explodes. By and large, that's usually not what a surface-to-air missile should do, and we do not know what kind of damage it has caused to that area of the city. With that, we're now going to be moving into Ukraine and Kharkov specifically, where we have seen that the Russians have been obliterated in the area, at least one artillery position, and the Ukrainians have now advanced forward and taken the area. Of course, I would like to note that we are playing these videos under the premise of fair use. They are being used for commentary and news reporting purposes, and therefore they are not subject to normal copyright. Also, as far as I know, considering this is being made by a government worker of Ukraine, considering it's made by a soldier in the Ukrainian army, and for that purpose, this may also fall under public domain for that reason. Always have to make sure to cross our P's and Q's on that one because considering what's happened recently, it is a little bit concerning. But this Russian position has been entirely destroyed, as we can see right there. And so with that nice little bombshell of a video, it's now time for us to move on from the Kharkiv area and on to the next. But before we move on, we have not gotten any news of any kind of ground being taken by the Ukrainians. We did see there that apparently they did, but we can't really say exactly where the Ukrainians are and how they're advancing. And so with that, we're going to be moving past to Balaklia and Izium area, where there's been nothing to report, and also there's been nothing to report in Slovyansk as well. However, in Seversk, we saw 2 Ukrainian T-64BM Bulats moving down the road. During these past 24 hours in the war, we have seen more Ukrainian tanks in action than ever before, which is suggesting that the Ukrainians are now beginning to take on offensive activities. These tanks then drive by our cameraman here on the ground, and we can see that they are clearly a T-64BM Bulat. The next T-64 then begins to roll forward, and we can see that it's having a little bit of problem being driven. It looks like they're having a little bit of a gear shifting deal. But we can see them drive on by. And unfortunately, we do not know where they were heading, but we do know that more Ukrainian tanks are in action now than ever before, at least on video. With that, we're now going to be moving into our next bit of news, which is actually not in the Seversk area, but in the Bakhmut area, and a little bit more of a funnier one. Here we can see some goggle men. These guys are wearing some kind of weird old Soviet goggles, and they're pretty funny. Also, this guy, he just goes through the entire video. Y'all will see. So with that, here's the video.
Товариш пане Зеленський, Бахмут під нашим контролем. І його буде тяжко взяти. Це тільки 2 особи, які держать першу оборону Бахмута. Наступна буде хужа. Сепари, не лізьте, бо буде вам пизда.
These guys are pretty funny, and I like the little goggles that they have on. It makes them look a little old-fashioned, and they are very neat. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from the Seversk and Bakhmut news, and while we have heard of heavy Ukrainian and Russian activity in this area, we cannot confirm who is taking ground from who. It seems like the Ukrainians may be conducting more counteroffensives in this area, but we have not been able to ascertain what kind of ground they have covered, and if the Russians are conducting any counterattacks, we haven't really been able to assess anything about those either. And so for now, the front lines remain stable, although that we know clearly that there is some pretty decent fighting going on. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the area of Bakhmut and Seversk and down into Donetsk itself, where we've seen that Russians have been surrendering in about a platoon-sized unit to the Ukrainians as they wave a white flag from what appears to be a ditch. We have heard reports from all over the front lines, like this video, showing that Russians have been surrendering in the Kharkiv area, Kherson, and also Donetsk. This is the only instance that we were able to confirm on video, but considering that this could be confirmed, I would have to believe that the rest of it may be true. We can see the soldier right there waving the white flag, and a Ukrainian pointing out that there are more soldiers moving into the area. The soldier continues to wave the white flag, letting the Ukrainians know they surrender. We're not really sure how these soldiers were collected now that they've made themselves prisoners of war, but it is still interesting to see that an entire platoon of Russians surrendered this late into the war. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news from the area of Pisky, where we've seen something absolutely valiant and brave from the Ukrainians. In case of y'all do not know, there's a bridge near Pisky called the Republic Bridge. It's an uncompleted bridge on an uncompleted highway that appears to have been made to circle around the city of Donetsk, something like a ring road. As you can see right here, it looked to be so. But this bridge was never completed, and it's now become a contentious battleground for both the Ukrainians and the Russians in this video, as it looks like... Let me click it again. Here we go. As they began to fight over the bridge. We'll have to mute the music for copyright purposes, but for the purposes of commentary and news reporting, we are using the actual video segments of the film to report on the situation going on in this area. We can see that the Russians are now beginning to advance onto the bridge from the upper left side of the screen, and the Russians are moving up somewhat quickly, actually. We now see the Russian taking position on the concrete wall and throwing grenades down into the lower area of the bridge. If we skip forward in the video, we will actually see that the second Russian has now moved forward as well, and there are Ukrainians down there right now as we speak. The Ukrainians are about to pop out here in a second, as we'll see in this video as I fast forward it just a little bit more. And now we can see the Ukrainian. He now lobs a grenade right past the first guy. He ducks for cover. And then the Ukrainian is going to get incredibly bold as he begins to fire directly up at the Russian, spraying dust and dirt up into the air as the bullets bounce off of the lip of the crater around him. More Ukrainians are now moving forward to this side of the bridge as the Russians and the Ukrainians exchange fire within feet of each other. This is the closest on film we've ever seen Russians and Ukrainians get involved in a firefight, and this is the bravest instance I've ever seen from the Ukrainians. We can see them continuing to spray the crater, and grenades are being lobbed over by the other Ukrainians and exploding near the Russians. The Russian in the rear is now covering fire for the first, as the first soldier is now getting ready to pull back. And as we skip forward in the video a little bit, you will see that this retreat, pretty much, is being committed by the Russian. The Ukrainians and the Russians would continue to exchange fire for quite some while and also lob grenades at each other until finally the Ukrainians were able to hold off the Russians long enough for the Ukrainian artillery to hone in on the Russians' position and begin to knock them out. As you can see, there's the exact same area of the bridge where the Ukrainians and the Russians were fighting before, and we can now see the artillery coming down and clearly taking out the Russian positions. It is impressive to see, and it's incredible to know that there is such heroism and bravery in the Ukrainian army as we saw right there. Moving on past the southern front, as the only bit of news we got was of some Belarusian volunteers firing a mortar, which, while being newsworthy, for the sake of this video being short, not a lot happened in the southern front today. However, in the Inner Hadar area, the United Nations was finally able to get their IAEA inspectors into the power plant, as we could see the convoy driving in yesterday on this video. When you see the convoy being led by a Russian armored car, a local police vehicle, and then finally the UN convoy of vehicles. Each one of these is carrying teams of IAEA inspectors, which, in case you all did not know, the IAEA is practically the regulatory agency for nuclear power around the world. They make sure to go and check up on nuclear power plants and also nuclear technology to make sure it's being kept in a safe way and a safe manner to make sure that it does not cause any accidents or bad results in the future. Once the IAEA inspectors got inside the reactors, they saw the Russian vehicles that had been stored within. This, of course, makes the power plant a target for military action and also makes the Russians use it as a non-demilitarized zone. We can see the inspectors looking at the vehicles with Z's clearly painted onto them. And it's incredibly clear that the Russians are violating the, I guess you could call the uh, the safety zone, I guess you could call it. I'm trying to come up with the best word for it that should be around a nuclear power plant, as hitting one with any kind of artillery or bombing could lead to disastrous results, and especially since there is now a reason for fighting to occur around the plant, considering that military forces are actually basing from inside of it. Finally, the last clip we got from the Enerhodar area was the Russians shelling the power plant with apparently airdropped munitions. We can see here in this video 2 of these munitions drop down onto the power plant and explode, throwing up dust and smoke right outside of one of the reactor buildings and setting off alarms. We can then hear and see a second one explode just behind the first, right there on video. And it is incredibly concerning to see. As we skip forward in the video, you'll actually see that there has been a crater formed by the explosion, and a rather sizable one at that. This is incredibly concerning, as a direct hit to the nuclear power plant could cause a meltdown, which would spread across most of Ukraine and cause injury and death to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Enerhodar area and down to Kherson, where we saw the Bayraktar has returned. Here's the first clip of the Ukrainian Bayraktar destroying a 2 S3 artillery piece by the Russians. As we can see, the Bayraktar is getting closer and closer. And as the Bayraktar gets closer, the bomb it is dropped is getting closer and closer to the target as well. And at the end of this video, we can see the bomb explode, destroying the 2 S3 and ensuring that the Russians will not be able to use that artillery piece again. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news, which, believe it or not, is another instance of a Bayraktar in action in the Kherson area, this time destroying 120mm mortars that the Russians were using, as well as supply trucks that were probably keeping this artillery unit alive and operational. We can see what appears to be the laser from the Bayraktar being used, and we can also see a Z clearly marked on the vehicle at the bottom of the screen, showing that it is in fact Russian. We can now see the bomb explode, taking out the mortar, and making sure that the Russians will not use that again. Skipping forward in the video, we can now see Euro 4320 hidden inside of a tree line, where it is trying to stay out of sight of a Ukrainian drone. However, it doesn't seem to have worked, since the Ukrainians will destroy this truck in a mere matter of seconds. The bomb rips through the Euro 4320, destroying it and completely knocking it out of service, and the supplies that were within it most likely went as well. With that, that's the end of that video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians have pulled the Bayraktars out again and are beginning to use them fairly well. However, the Marlboro man has made a return. He has been on chain-smoking ventures with the Moskva and also at Crimean airfields, and he now appears to be in Kherson, as he's now blown up an ammunition depot within the city. Smoke is billowing up out of this ammunition depot, and sirens are going off around the entire city as the ammunition depot has now been wiped out. The Russians, having really no way to resupply their garrisons in the Kherson pocket, are now going to resort to using a very small amount of supplies and ammunition, considering that multiple ammunition depots that they have relied on for the past 2 days have been destroyed by Ukrainian fire. With that, that's the end of that video, and we're now going to be moving on into our last bit of news from Kherson before we move to Lviv. And this is showing some Russian soldiers saying that everything is pizde, which means that it's not good. And so, here's the video of them saying that everything is not really going too well.
Как нас разъебали. АГСу пизда. Сортиру пизда. Две БМПшки мы в рот дали. Выебли. Да. Дерево нахуй лежит.
And we can see the trash strewn about in typical Russian fashion. With that, that's the end of the video, and while I would love to give you all updates on the area of Kherson, I unfortunately cannot. The Ukrainians have requested that we do not give away Ukrainian forces, where they're going, and where they're heading, and so, unfortunately, I cannot say anything about this front line rather than what we could see on video. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kherson area and towards Lviv, where today we saw a massive fire break out at a former bus factory within the city. We're not sure if this is a deliberate act of sabotage by the Russians, or if this was an entirely accidental fire, but it had grown to great heights in this video. With that, that's the end of that video, and somewhat concerning to see. And so with that, we're now going to be handing it over to President Zelensky, who is going to round out our short summary news for the day with his speech, and then we will be rounding out this summary as a whole. And so, without further ado, let me rewind this real quick and then start it over so that way y'all can hear the speech and also turn it up.
Українці, українки, сьогодні в нашій державі почався новий навчальний рік. Як це і має бути? Попри все, більш ніж півроку повномасштабної війни, надзвичайні руйнування, яких завдали нам окупанти. Але навчання українських дітей продовжується. Продовжується в різних форматах, однак всюди системно, професійно. І я вдячний усім нашим освітянам, які продовжують працювати і гарантують своєю увагою до дітей, що у всіх юних українок є можливість стати освіченими і жити гідним сучасним життям. Більше 300 тисяч першачків, майже 4 мільйони учнів. Ось такий цьогоріч масштаб 1 вересня. Тож, окрім багатьох інших висновків, сьогодні можна зробити дуже важливий політичний висновок про стійкість нашої держави, про силу нашого суспільства. Наші освітні інституції дієві. Наша держава і місцеві громади забезпечують відновлення навчання навіть у тих районах, в яких при окупації школи були зруйновані. Сьогодні я був в Ірпені, Київської області, бачив початок роботи такої школи відновленої. 1300 учнів і учениць здобуватимуть там освіту. Діти пішли у перший клас, як це і заведено. Я був щасливий побачити, як вони починають вчитись і в яких умовах це відбувається. Хороша, комфортна, по-людськи тепла школа. І так само буде на всій території нашої держави, з якою ми обов'язково виженемо окупантів. Щоб вони не зруйнували, ми все відновимо, ми все відбудуємо. Як би вони не хотіли знищити Україну і українське, наші діти все одно підуть у свої школи, у свої університети і будуть абсолютно вільно здобувати освіту. Національну освіту, гуманістичну освіту. Таку освіту, яка побудована не на брехні і пропаганді, яку поширює держава-терорист, а на реальних знаннях, на відкритості світу, на найкращих людських цінностях. Сьогодні місія МАГАТЕ прибула на Запорізьку АЕС. Добре, що це відбулось, сам факт, попри всі провокації російських військових і цинічні обстріли Енергодару і території станції. Україна зробила все для того, щоб ця місія відбулась. Але погано, що окупанти намагаються перетворити цю місію МАГАТЕ дійсно необхідну на безплідну екскурсію по станції. Вірю, що цього вдасться не допустити. Добре, що представники МАГАТЕ мають змогу зробити об'єктивні висновки про ризики, які виникли на Запорізькій атомній станції вперше в історії. Причому виникли саме через окупантів. Головне, щоб була воля зробити саме об'єктивні висновки, постійні обстріли, присутність російських військових та зброї на станції, знущання з українського персоналу і намагання віддати станцію під управління представників Росатому, які взагалі не здатні до відповідального ставлення до такого об'єкту. Ось це причини загроз. У нас є чіткі дані про те, що Росія робила дуже багато цинічних речей, щоб обманути місію. В тому числі за допомогою залякування мешканців Енергодару. Окупанти заставляли людей брехати представникам МАГАТЕ, передавати якісь папірці, щось там підписувати, щось говорити. Коли ми бачились з паном Гросі і членами місії у Києві, ми домовились про те, що місію обов'язково будуть супроводжувати журналісти з українських та міжнародних ЗМІ. Незалежні журналісти, щоб світ бачив правду, бачив, що насправді відбувається. На жаль, це не зроблено, хоча обіцяно. На жаль, окупанти не пустили журналістів, але організували масовку своїх пропагандистів. На жаль, представники МАГАТЕ не захистили представників незалежних ЗМІ. Сподіваємось, що місія все ж зробить об'єктивні висновки з обставин на станції. Під управлінням наших спеціалістів понад 3 десятиліття перебувають 5 об'єктів. Чорнобильська станція і 4 діючі АЕС. До діяльності жодного з цих об'єктів у МАГАТЕ ніколи не було зауважень, поки Росія не вдерлася на нашу територію і не принесла сюди своє божевілля. Коли нарешті з території Запорізької АЕС вийдуть російські військові, коли вони заберуть свою зброю, боєприпаси, коли вони припинять обстріли Енергодару та сусідніх районів та свої провокації, Запорізька станція зможе повернутися до цілком безпечної роботи, яка і була завжди під контролем України. І головне, що має відбутись, це демілітаризація території станції. Саме це є метою українських і міжнародних зусиль. І погано, що ми поки що не почули відповідних закликів від МАГАТЕ, хоча і говорили про це з паном Гросі на нашій зустрічі в Києві. Це був ключовий безпековий пункт наших домовленостей. Це говорилося чітко. Демілітаризація і повний контроль українських атомників. Зустрівся сьогодні з міністром закордонних справ Данії, який прибув в Україну. Подякував за підтримку, і це дуже корисна підтримка, зокрема в оборонній сфері. Обговорили подальші кроки. Кроки на захист України і всієї об'єднаної Європи, санкційну політику і відновлення нашої держави після бойових дій. Провів першу розмову з новим прем'єр-міністром Ізраїлю Лапідом. Я підкреслив необхідність приєднання Ізраїлю до санкцій проти Росії, до санкцій за усе принесене цією війною зло. Зло, яке не мало би повернутися ніколи знову. Звернувся до польського народу. 1 вересня є річницею початку Другої світової війни. Сказав у цьому зверненні важливу річ, як і той агресор був переможений і засуджений. Неминуче буде переможений і засуджений і цей агресор. Коли вільний світ об'єднаний і жертва агресії не залишається наодинці, коли ніхто не укладає ганебних пактів, зі злом війна завершиться перемогою сил добра. Підписав черговий указ про нагородження наших воїнів, 155 учасників бойових дій, відзначені державними нагородами, із них 22 посмертно. Загалом, з 24 лютого державні нагороди отримали вже 28 тисяч 42 українських воїна. Ті, хто героїчно захищає нашу державу на усіх напрямках. Хто вибив ворога з півночі, хто б'є окупантів на сході, хто знищує їх на півдні. І що дуже важливо зараз, працює на звільнення нашого Криму. А особливо сьогодні хочу подякувати нашим захисникам на Харківському напрямку, 92-й бригаді, усім воїнам і комбригу Федосенку. Дякую за вашу хоробрість, хлопці. І також нашим повітряним силам. Вчора дуже добре відпрацювали зенітники на Донеччині, збили черговий вертоліт окупантів, вже 205-й за час повномасштабної війни, та 2 безпілотники. А загалом вже більше 800 російських безпілотників знищено. Сьогодні ж наші повітряні сили непогано відпрацювали по ворожих ракетах. Дякую за результат. Дякую усім, хто захищає Україну. Слава Україні!
And so with that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky here on day 191 of the news. And of course, it has been an absolute pleasure to cover this once more to all of y'all. I hope you all have enjoyed it. Please make sure to subscribe, and I will see you all tonight on day 192's news of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all, and I will see you then.